The FBI estimates in the United States alone at any given time there are 25 to 50 active serial killers. Now, imagine across the world. On Halloween night, after a 5-month killing spree throughout San Fernando Valley, California in 1979, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris sadistically humiliated, tortured, raped, and killed their last victim. It was their most brutal murder ever, and they got it all on tape. The two organized killers escalated in violence after each kill, like they were chasing a high. But thankfully their terrible reign came to a swift end when Norris divulged their dark secrets to a former fellow inmate who was disgusted by what they had done. Lawrence Sigmund Bittaker was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and was put up for adoption as an infant. His adopted father, George Bittaker, worked at aircraft factories, forcing him and his parents to move around often. He grew up in 4 different states before his family finally settled in California. Though he had an IQ of 138, he dropped out of high school when he was 17, having already been arrested on several occasions for petty crimes. Shortly afterward, he was sentenced to 2 years for auto theft, evading arrest, and leaving the scene of a hit and run. Just days after finishing the sentence in California Youth Authority, he was arrested by the FBI in Louisiana for violating the Interstate Motor Vehicle Theft Act. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison to be served at a federal reformatory in Oklahoma, but was transferred to a medical center in Missouri through good behavior. He later claimed to have had his first sexual experience there, but wouldn't give any details other than that it was with a woman there. After serving only 1/3 of his sentence, he was released. In 1960, he was arrested for robbery in Los Angeles. The next year, he was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in a state prison. A psychiatric evaluation of him stated that he was paranoid and a borderline psychotic as well as manipulative. In spite of this, he was conditionally released in 1963. Just 2 months afterward, he was imprisoned for violating his parole and suspicion of robbery. Over the following 15 years, he was frequently incarcerated for various crimes. One of his last sentences were for attempted murder for stabbing a clerk in the parking lot of a grocery store after attempting to shoplift a steak. While serving a sentence at California's men's colony in San Luis Obispo, he met Roy Norris. I think we can safely say Bittaker is a piece of shit. Roy Lewis Norris was born in Greenlee, Colorado, and joined the U.S. Navy at the age of 17. Most of his service time was spent in San Diego, California, though he spent 4 months in Vietnam, but never saw combat. In November of '69, he was arrested for attempted rape when he attacked a female motorist. 3 months later, while out on bail, he was arrested again for breaking and entering into a woman's home with the intention to rape her, but was stopped by police. He consequently received an administrative discharge from the Navy on the grounds of psychological problems and severe schizoid personality. In May of the next year, while still on bail, he nearly killed a female San Diego State College student by slamming her head into a street after bashing her head with a rock. Because she survived, he was only charged with assault with a deadly weapon. He was placed in Atascadero State Hospital, a psychiatric institution, as a mentally disordered sex offender, and was released after 5 years when he was deemed as being no further danger. Only 3 months later, Norris strangled a woman to the point of unconsciousness and raped her. A month later, he was identified as the assailant and was convicted of forcible rape. While serving his sentence in St. Louis Obispo, he met Bittaker, who he claimed saved his life twice. When they found that they shared the same sadistic fantasies, they made a plan to start raping and torturing girls together and killing them to make sure they wouldn't be caught. After being paroled, Bittaker got a job as a machinist in Los Angeles. 2 months later, Norris was paroled as well, moved in with his mother in LA, and got a job as an electrician. In February 1979, they made contact with each other and set their plan in motion. So Bittaker bought a 1977 GMC cargo van which had no side or rear windows and a big door on the passenger side through which the victims could be snatched. They nicknamed it the Murder Mac and spent a few months doing trial runs, simply cruising along the Pacific Coast Highway and occasionally stopping at beaches to talk to girls and take their pictures. In June, they abducted their first victim, 16-year-old Cindy Schaeffer, whom they forced into her truck, duct-taped her mouth, and bound her ankles and wrists. After raping, torturing, and killing her at a fire trail in a nearby mountain, they dumped her body in a canyon. The following month, they abducted 18-year-old Andrea Hall, took turns raping her, taunted her by encouraging her to scream, and then killed her. On September 3rd, they abducted two girls, 15-year-old Jackie Gilliam and 13-year-old Leah Lamp, and held them captive for 2 days, raping them and recording their captivity the entire time. Then they murdered them both. They then abducted Shirley Sanders on September 30th and raped her, but she managed to escape. She was able to report the assault, but couldn't identify her attackers or remember the car's license plate number, and the matter wasn't pursued any further. On October 30th, they abducted and murdered their victim, Shirley Lynette Bedford, deciding to dump her body on a lawn in Hermosa Beach instead of in the wilderness. Unlike their previous victims, she was raped and tortured while the car was being driven around, instead of when it was parked at the duo's usual killing site. The press nicknamed them the Toolbox Killers since they were believed to be a single perpetrator. In October, Norris bragged about his and Bittaker's murders to Jimmy Dalton, a friend of theirs from prison, who initially thought the stories were lies. However, when Ledford's body was discovered, he reported Norris to his lawyer, who passed the information on to the LA Police Department. Two police detectives began staking out Norris and arrested him for marijuana possession and parole violation when he was spotted dealing it on the street shortly before Thanksgiving of that year. Bittaker was also arrested for abducting and raping Shirley Sanders. After a long interrogation, Norris confessed to being involved in the murders, but insisted that he was mainly an accomplice and had been high on drugs during the murders, beginning to pin the murders on Bittaker. He was allowed to plea bargain, enabling him to place all of the blame on Bittaker. Norris also helped investigators find the bodies of Jackie Gilliam and Leah Lamp. Both men were charged on several counts of kidnapping, rape, robbery, deviant sexual assault, criminal conspiracy, and murder, each blaming the other. When the audio recordings they made of their murders turned up, Norris was revealed to have been an active participant. Ultimately, likely due to his assistance in the investigation, Norris was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison. In 2010, he applied for parole, but was denied, being ineligible for another 10 years. Bittaker was sentenced to death and is still on death row.